The freezing rain poured relentlessly, soaking his frail, trembling body. He didn't move. He didn't want to live anymore. The German shepherd, once loved and cared for, was now alone, abandoned on the side of a desolate road. The people he trusted had betrayed him. His dull eyes reflected a single thought. It was over. Then, headlights pierced through the darkness. Would someone finally stop, or would it be just another indifferent soul, leaving him to freeze and be forgotten? What happened next changed everything in the most unbelievable way. The rain came down in relentless sheets, soaking everything in its path. The night air was sharp, the wind howling through the empty stretch of road, carrying the bitter cold with it. Each drop hit the asphalt with a harsh slap, pooling into dark puddles that reflected the distant glow of streetlights. Curled up on the muddy shoulder of the road, a German shepherd lay still, his frail body pressed against the cold ground. His fur, once thick and full, was now soaked through, clinging to his emaciated frame. His ribs jutted out sharply beneath his patchy coat, his muscles too weak to carry him anymore. But he wasn't trying to move, not anymore. His amber eyes, once filled with life, had dulled. His ears, which once stood tall and alert, drooped lifelessly against his head. His breath came slow, uneven, barely visible in the freezing air. He had fought for as long as he could. He had chased after their car, paws skidding against the pavement, his lungs burning as he ran after them. His heart had pounded so hard in his chest, certain they had made a mistake, that if he could just reach them, they would stop. But they never stopped. He had waited, for hours, for days. Every car that passed made his ears flick, his head lift just slightly, before falling again in disappointment. They weren't coming back. The hunger had come first, then the exhaustion, then the cold, and now he felt nothing at all. His body had given up before his heart did, but even that was fading now. The steady downpour continued to hammer against him, plastering his fur to his bony frame. The mud beneath him grew colder, seeping into his skin. His paws were stiff, unresponsive. He wasn't sure when he had last stood. A dim light flickered in the distance. Headlights. Another car. He had stopped watching them go by. He had stopped hoping. This one was no different. The tires splashed against the wet pavement, slowing down as they neared. The glow from the headlights spread over him, illuminating his thin, shaking form. Then something changed. The car didn't keep driving. It stopped. The low rumble of the engine vibrated through the night, idling. A door opened. Footsteps crunched against the wet gravel, slow, careful. A shadow moved toward him, hesitating before kneeling beside his body. Warm fingers pressed lightly against his ribs. A sharp intake of breath. Oh my God. The voice was soft, almost drowned out by the rain, feminine, concerned. He barely reacted. A hand brushed over his head, moving damp fur away from his dull eyes. The touch was light, hesitant, but not cruel. The figure shifted, crouching lower. A jacket rustled. You poor thing. Warmth. Something soft draped over him. A coat, heavy with body heat. The sudden contrast made his skin prickle, his muscles twitch involuntarily. Then, gentle hands slid underneath him, lifting. For a split second, a weak instinct flared in his mind. His body stiffened slightly, his breath hitched. But he was too weak to resist, too far gone to care. "You're not dying here," the voice said again, firmer this time. Then, for the first time in days, he felt himself being carried. The motion rocked him, his head leaning against a warm shoulder. He barely noticed the rain anymore. A car door opened, the smell of leather, the faint scent of something familiar, something safe. The hands didn't let go. A soft towel was pressed around him, a barrier against the cold. The car door shut, enclosing them in warmth. The engine hummed softly as the car pulled away. For the first time since they had left him, he let his eyes close. For the first time, he wasn't alone. Because it was different. She could feel it, something about him, his silence, his exhaustion, the way he had just given up. It was haunting. She looked at the dog again, and that's when she saw it. A scar, faint but long, running just behind his shoulder blade. Emily frowned. She shifted slightly, careful not to startle him, and gently lifted the fur around it. It wasn't a fresh wound. It had healed a long time ago, but it was deep, too precise to be an accident. Emily's stomach twisted. This wasn't just a stray. This dog had a past, and someone, somewhere, had left a mark on him that wasn't just physical. The sun had fully risen by the time Emily stepped outside, pulling her coat tighter around her body. The air was crisp, the scent of damp earth lingering after the storm. The world felt new, as if the night before had been washed away. But inside her chest, something heavy remained. She glanced back at the house. Through the window, she could see the German shepherd lying on the blanket near the fireplace, his body still weak, but his breathing steady. The scar on his shoulder wouldn't leave her mind. She had seen scars before, old wounds, healed injuries, evidence of past pain, but this one had a precision to it. This wasn't an accident. Someone had hurt him. Emily clenched her jaw. She needed answers. Inside, the soft crackle of the fire filled the silence. The dog was awake, his eyes half open, watching her cautiously, not trusting, but not running either. Emily knelt beside him, careful to move slowly. "Hey, buddy," she murmured. "You hanging in there?" He didn't react, but he was listening. She set a small bowl of soft food in front of him. It wasn't much, just something gentle for his stomach, but she didn't expect him to eat right away. For a moment he stared at it, then, slowly, his nose twitched. Emily held her breath. A single movement, a tiny instinct. Then he licked at the food. Not a bite, not a meal, but a taste. It was the first time he had eaten anything since she found him. Her chest tightened. She didn't move, didn't speak. She just let him take his time. After a few moments he stopped, lifting his head again. His gaze met hers. Emily's breath caught. It was barely a glance, just a flick of his tired amber eyes before he looked away. But it was something. She swallowed against the sudden lump in her throat. She had been rescuing animals for years. She had seen dogs in worse conditions, had patched up broken bones and stitched up wounds. But this was different. This wasn't just a rescue. This was something deeper, something aching, and she was terrified of it. Mark sat across from her at the kitchen table, his coffee steaming in front of him. "You think he belonged to someone?" he asked, frowning. Emily nodded slowly. "I'm sure of it. He has a scar. It's clean, almost surgical, and he's not reacting like a stray would. He's waiting for something." Mark took a sip of his coffee, setting the mug down with a quiet thud. "So what now?" Emily rubbed her temples. "I don't know." "You're keeping him," she sighed. "I don't know that either." Mark smirked. "Yeah, you do." Emily exhaled, glancing toward the living room. The dog was still there, his head resting on his paws. His body, though frail, had relaxed slightly. The blankets around him weren't just covering him now. He had buried himself into them, like maybe he was finally allowing himself to believe he was safe. She swallowed. She had promised herself she wouldn't get attached, but looking at him now, she knew it was too late. She was already his. The morning air was sharp, crisp with the lingering chill of last night's storm. The ground was still damp, the scent of wet earth heavy in the air. Emily stood at the edge of the porch, arms crossed against the cold, watching the German shepherd lying near the fireplace inside. For the first time since she had found him, he wasn't asleep. He was watching her. Not with fear, not with hesitation, just watching. It was enough. She took a breath. "Come on, buddy. Let's get some fresh air." It took time. At first he didn't want to move. His legs were still weak, and every step seemed to take effort. But Emily didn't rush him. She stood beside him, waiting. And then, slowly, he followed her. She walked across the yard, and he stayed at her side. Not because she was leading him, because he chose to. Her heart clenched at the realization. They moved in silence, the soft crunch of damp leaves underfoot the only sound between them. The wind ruffled his fur and he lifted his nose slightly, as if drinking in the scent of the world he had been shut away from for so long. Then he stopped. Emily slowed, turning toward him. "What is it?" His ears twitched. Then his head snapped up. His muscles went rigid, his eyes locked onto something beyond the trees. Emily's pulse quickened. "Hey, what is it?" But he wasn't listening. He took a step forward, then another, and then he bolted. "Wait!" Emily sprinted after him, her boots slipping against the damp ground. The dog moved with purpose, not hesitation, not panic. He knew where he was going. The realization sent a chill down her spine. She had seen him lost. She had seen him broken. But this wasn't random. He was going home. The trail opened onto a narrow road lined with trees still dripping from the storm. The German shepherd skidded to a stop, his chest heaving, his amber eyes locked on something in the distance. Emily followed his gaze and froze. A house, not abandoned, not empty. And standing at the edge of the driveway, staring back at them with wide, disbelieving eyes, a man. Emily's breath caught. The dog didn't move. The man didn't move. And then, "Ranger?" The word was barely a whisper, but the dog heard it. He heard it, and before Emily could even react, he ran straight toward him. Emily stood frozen, her heart hammering as the German shepherd sprinted toward the man. He didn't hesitate, didn't look back, didn't pause to reconsider. He knew him. And finally, he was home,